Thank you very much. I can guarantee that we will use all of our time. So I'm really excited about the discussion today around data aggregators and a conversation around how that can enable product and pricing innovation. We've got a fabulous group just by way of background. My name is Alex Lazaro. I work at the Omidyar Network. We're a philanthropic investment firm founded by Pierre and Pam Omidyar. Pierre's the founder of eBay. We've invested about $1 billion, and fintech is one of our major areas. And we're really excited about data and alternative data in the space. And you probably noticed in your bag, we had a report on that in the credit analytics space. We've got a great discussion today. So we've got three panelists. Rich Matsui, who's who leads KWH Analytics. They're a solar risk management platform with clients like Google and PNC Bank, and they're now experimenting with an insurance product. We also have Mike Levin with Vericred, which is a healthcare data analytics platform, and Cameron Jacox from Inforce Pro, which is new data for policy and relationship management in the life insurance space. Before we get to the panel, I think it'd be really helpful for us to know who's in the room and for the cadence of the conversation. But if you're a startup, maybe put your hand up. Okay. If you're an incumbent insurance company. Okay. And an investor? Okay. And do you today use alternative data or big data for customer acquisition? Okay. Pricing? Okay. For relationship management? For anything? Okay. And are you really excited about this discussion? Okay. There's only about not that much participation, so maybe you're in the wrong room. Maybe just to kick things off, I think it'd be just helpful. Why don't I ask all three of the panelists to talk a little bit more about their business model, but also focus on the data part of it. So what type of new raw data are you collecting, are you aggregating? How are you making it useful for customers? And later on, we'll talk a little bit about the evolution of product and pricing. Rich, do you want to kick us off?
Happy to. So as Alex mentioned, we are a solar energy MGA. But what I think makes us a little bit unique, perhaps, is that our core business, we've been around for 5 years. We have a software product that's used by some of the largest investors in solar energy projects in the United States. So through that, we now have aggregated 10% of the data from all the operating solar projects here in the US, building models on top of that data, which enables someone to insure that risk.
And we are a life insurance data analytics platform that helps life insurers, which are some of the biggest players in the economy today, engage with their in-force blocks of business, their existing clients, by way of collecting data about what's in force, how it's performing, and also what the client's goals are and how they change over time. And so at its core, the whole platform is based on using the data that insurers already have and augmenting it to make them or bring them closer to their policyholders.
Good afternoon. So Vericred is a health insurance data platform comprised today of 3 data sets: plan design and rate data, provider network data, and formulary data. And we aggregate data from thousands of different sources, we normalize it, we structure it, and then deliver it to technology companies who are transforming the way health insurance and employee benefits are quoted, sold, and enrolled. And increasingly, to technology companies that are helping individuals make better use of their benefits.
And so that's actually really helpful. The data is actually, it's really interesting as input, but really how it becomes applicable is in creating new products and changing pricing. Mike, you're a B2B player. You work with a lot of other companies, and you provide them with data and analytics, and then they can then reinvent products and things. Can you talk a little bit about how you're adding value to your partners and what they can do with it?
Sure. So most of our customers today are technology companies that are transforming the way health insurance is sold. So think about an online shopping experience for health insurance, whether it be an individual or group. These are marketplaces where you can buy health insurance and ancillary benefits. And for those companies, we act as a single point of integration. Otherwise, they would have to build their data from thousands of different sources. And none of them create value or differentiate themselves by building the data. They differentiate themselves and create value by building features and functionality and user experiences and distribution. So that's what those are most of our customers today. but there's so many different use cases for our data. So if I may, just to use an example, we were approached by a startup, and I looked at their website, and they help individuals who are going to Disney World minimize their wait time on lines by looking at when they're going and what rides they want to see. And they guarantee they'll lose 30% of their wait time by using this app. So I said, well, what's the relevance here to us? Why are you coming? So apparently a doctor out of the Midwest who treats type 2 diabetes patients approached this company and said, look, there's lots of drug regimens that work, but they cost, and they can incur different costs on the patient based on insurance and their formularies. So we need this data. We know this is effective. We ran an MVP and saw great results. How do we scale this out nationally? And today, we're the only place that they can go in one integration point to get that data. So a really cool example of how our data can benefit not only the shopping experience, but those who have insurance.
That's helpful. And Cameron, so you work in a different part of insurance, right? You're focused on life insurance, and you're also working with the agent side of it. Can you talk a little bit about how you're providing data to your partners and what type of applications they've been able to do because of it? Sure.
So the biggest component of value add in our platform is the fact that we started by providing a platform out to a dashboarding system out to all those agents in the field in life insurance. And so as a result, we're now able to collect data on what they're doing with it and report that back from an analytics perspective. And so in an industry where you've got an enormous amount of competition and brokerage, where carriers are competing with one another on a day-to-day basis, historically all they've known, for example, is that a policy lapses. And maybe that person's uninsured now. But really they could have gone somewhere else to buy that policy. That carrier that they bought the new policy with only knows that it's a new policy. So as a multi-carrier platform, we can track agent activity, and by adding in that simple point of sale survey about why they made that decision, we are able to add a lot of insight about, not to get into it too early, but product and pricing at the carrier level.
Do you want to give one example of how one of your partners has built a new product or radically changed their product using these types of insights?
Yeah, so life insurance is premised on the beneficiary and the policy. And one example is that we found that if a beneficiary change occurs and they change from spouse to child, and it's under a certain age, then it's highly correlated with divorce. So you can read into the data and say, well, okay, now we have to act upon this opportunity to prevent asset leakage out of our firm if we're a financial advisory firm. And you can start to adjust the product in ways that allows you to better track the information about beneficiary changes or encourage them to better report that information.
That's really interesting. Rich, maybe we can actually turn it a little bit to you, because what in some ways you're building with your data is actually a new type of product that doesn't really exist. Can you talk a little bit about that data and then also the journey to actually create this new product, find partners that want to back it, et cetera? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, first off is that we're actively looking for risk capital partners. So for the 10 of you that raise your hands, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. For us, I think the philosophy of how we think about data dates back to a conversation we had several years ago. So we met with the chairman of a company called CoreLogic. And so CoreLogic is this firm that has data on 99% of all the mortgages. And so the chairman of this company said, look, if solar becomes as big of an asset class as you think it is, someone will do what we, CoreLogic, did for mortgages, but do it for solar. Because every mature asset class in the US has a CoreLogic for that space. So TREP for commercial mortgages, Experian for consumer credit, Ascend for aircraft leases. It's one of these pretty common models, but the question that comes up here is, how do you pull that data together? And so we've been pulling this data together through our software tool. And because we have this software tool that now allows us to have 10% of the industry's data, that's how we can start doing the interesting things when it comes to analytics to really enable an insurance carrier to be able to price that risk accurately.
And so that's an interesting segue around pricing, because I want to talk about that. And not just because it's important, it's in the title, but also because I think it is a really big opportunity around data aggregators and new data. Can you talk about what you're doing around pricing and how what you have created is fundamentally different than what was possible before.
Sure, I think that's, so solar is a relatively new space. And so I think for many other folks in the room, it's probably taking existing data streams that you already knew about, but really making it actionable. For us, this is kind of brand new. There is no one else that has this repository of solar asset data. And so once you have that information in one place, as an example, there's 100 different panel brands, solar panel manufacturers that sell solar panels. Our industry does not have a clue about who builds a good quality product, which is fine, except that there's $500 billion of solar projects in the ground globally today. And this basic question of who sells a decent product, no one even knows, at least from an empirical data-driven perspective. And so I feel like for the rest of the folks in this room, it's probably about optimizing. For solar, it's just even the most basic questions. What works, what does not work, is kind of where our industry is at. And that's where we see the opportunity to add value.
And Cameron, you also have a unique set of data. How have you partnered with your clients around the pricing side of it too?
Sure. So in life insurance, pricing is very dynamic. It's driven off of things like the macroeconomic environment. Historically, it's driven off of really two vectors, mortality tables and the performance of the insurance company. They have certain levers they can push and pull when it comes to pricing, and those allow them to maintain good financial performance. Only very recently have they started to see how they can use pricing to impact both consumer behavior as well as persistency, which is really the golden ticket in life insurance. And so in our particular case, we've been able to help insurance companies in particular see opportunities to optimize pricing for certain demographics or certain product types at certain points in the life cycle of that product, because the contract lasts 20 or 30 years, to prevent some of the switching that we're seeing happen at certain points, where policyholders will make a change because of a recent pricing change. We're saying, well, here's the sensitivity, how many people you'll lose if that happens, and so they can start to make trade-offs more intelligently rather than on really broad assumptions.
And Mike, I know you're less involved on the pricing side, but do you have any perspectives around how some of your clients are thinking about this and thinking about their work with you as they look towards innovating price and product combination?
Yeah, so the consumerization of healthcare is happening. As individuals, we're paying more for our insurance, we're paying more out of pocket for visits. It's expensive. It's one of our largest spends as an individual and as a company. So ultimately, our data enables choice and transparency. The gentleman from Trove spoke a lot about transparency this morning. So, for example, in New York, there's over 130 health plans available to individuals. How would you otherwise sort through that without having the right tools? Whether your doctor's in or out directly affects how much you'll pay for services, and the cost outside of network can be crippling. The EpiPen discussion that's been all in the news is a direct reflection not just of the pharmaceutical companies, but of the health insurances and the formularies. And I myself have a peanut allergy child, and today I pay $100 for an EpiPen under my plan, but last year I paid $600. I paid that list price. So our data sets enable transparency to help individuals make the right choice, help businesses select the right plan or plans based on their facts and circumstances.
So we've now spent the first 15 minutes of the conversation talking about the potential for data to change things on the product side and on the pricing side. I'd love to actually shift gears and talk about some of the challenges you face as you think about scaling some of this. And I think there's many. We talked about a couple. What do you think are the one or two biggest challenges you face to using data to change products and change pricing? Cameron, you're nodding your head. Why don't you kick us off?
So there's a couple real big categories. The first is that we are dealing with insurance companies, most of us, and if not, then we're dealing with the regulations that have been built to for them to deal with. Those are big regulations that young companies have a difficult time managing through. But I would say the big thing that I want to cover first is selling to these big enterprises. I don't know if that's a challenge for you guys, but getting into and going through their sales processes and getting through their security-related processes and getting through their buying cycles when it's something brand new But we have seen a great improvement over the last 6 months with the advent of InsurTech as a category, because especially the carriers with innovation or venture arms have started to help younger companies shepherd them through the process of getting at least to a proof of concept, after which point the product and the results will speak for themselves. But getting to that point within a large company or B2B selling more broadly is a very, very arduous process.
How about Mike, Rich, any other thoughts?
I mean, for us, our challenges are also the way we create value.
Yeah.
And our data sets are highly fragmented. They're rapidly changing. There's a ton of churn in them. They're really dirty, and they're non-standardized. And if you want to create innovative applications, that doesn't work. So, a simple example is primary care physician. How much is it going to cost when I go see a doctor? Well, there may be 30 or 40 different combinations that way that plan design could be built based on deductibles and co-pays and co-insurance and free visits and the way you stack those up. But the way we see it in the raw data is those 30 to 40 may map to 300 or 400. So that doesn't work if you're trying to build something as simple as just sorting. How do you sort on a deductible if it's sitting in different places in that benefit design? So our challenge is normalizing all that data so that it is useful not only for today's use, but where we see the industry out 18 months, because it's moving and it's moving really fast. So we need to be supporting those use cases. And yeah, indeed, that's how we create value.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just add on to the point that Cameron said. B2B sales it's challenging. I would say that for us, we sell our software to infrastructure investors and banks. And so it's a very similar type of challenge what you're describing. It's just there's a big organization, and you're probably talking to the wrong guy when you first start. So even finding that first person who can shepherd you through is a really big deal.
Let's double click on this, because two of you have mentioned B2B sales, and you have a room with about half the room are from traditional insurance companies. What have you seen that has worked well with the partners you've worked with? And perhaps what are the one or two things that you could ask them to change since they're in the room as they think about partnering with data aggregators like you?
I guess the first thing would be we've seen enormous success with internal innovation labs and even just chief innovation officers as a standalone title, whose job it is sometimes to oversee a venture capital arm which makes strategic investments, but usually is just more broadly meant to help shepherd through innovation. So I think that asking for a broader cultural change within the org to be more receptive to new disruptive technologies is probably harder to ask. I think the first step that at least we've seen real evidence of being successful is creating that type of a position of someone whose job it really is and who has some clout. And it is to shepherd new things through the organization. I think once you do that a couple of times, folks start to realize how cool some of the new technologies are, and they start to watch for them themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. And I'm just thinking to myself, right before I walked in here, I met with a woman who is part of the innovation group for a large insurance company. And she's been helping us navigate this. My first time meeting her in person, and I told her, you are the person who's helping us to navigate the river Styx. Without you, I would probably be in the river somewhere. There's just no way to figure out who to actually talk to at these big companies. It really is a very big value add.
Mm-hmm. And for us, the carrier, the health plans in our case, aren't today a customer, but actually a data source. And some have used control over their data as a means to control their distribution. But the world's changing. We've got millennials that are buying differently, that want choice, that want to go online. And these carriers need to recognize and indeed embrace that there are new paths to both engage and service customers. So, and to do that, their data needs to be more readily available. So our challenge is a little bit different there, and that is getting those partners to open up and say, yes, we see your role in the ecosystem. We want to support this innovation, and we're willing to give up control where we believe that control is ultimately at a later stage of their life cycle.
I was a little surprised when we went through this challenges conversation. There was only a fleeting remark around regulatory by you, Cameron. We talked a lot about B2B, but has the regulatory side not been a barrier for you? Is it something that challenged?
Yeah. So for us, we're not an insurance company. If we were to try to create a risk product, I think we would encounter a lot of those challenges with state and federal regulatory bodies. But more of what we deal with as data providers is just traditional PII and security protocols, and being able to pass and indeed do very well at a security audit that a company will want to put you through, both as a vendor as well as a receiver of their data, because we're in the same position. We rely on our carrier partners both to be customers, but also to serve up at least the foundation of the data that we are trying to liberate from their administrative systems. But no, I don't think, besides just making sure that you have a secure environment for the data, we haven't encountered very much from a regulatory perspective at all, which is great.
Okay.
Yeah. Nor have we.
Okay.
So yeah, I think that there is some challenges there. So one of the things I thought was very interesting is one of our venture investors has a group that he's been creating, a partnership with Capgemini to create like I call it MGA as a service, right? So it's SaaSifying that expense item, which for a startup that understands, we've been in solar for 5 years, I've been in the industry for 10, I know a lot about solar, but this whole conversation, this whole conference, there's a lot of things I don't know. And so insofar as we can partner with people who bring to the table that infrastructure, allows us to turn it on and ramp as we grow, it's a tremendous source of value for us.
Mm-hmm. I want to leave a couple minutes, and I'm giving you the warning for a Q&A from the audience, so think of your questions now. But maybe I'll ask you to tee that up before. Look forward 5, 10, 15 years. How does the ecosystem look once we start as an industry embracing these new types of data across different segments of insurance, across different parts of the value chain? What does it look like? Where do you think the biggest opportunity, and B, how does the ecosystem change? Who wants to take that first?
I'll start it. I think that first of all, and we've talked about this a lot, but the fact that all of us have built the foundations of our businesses on data means that we inherently, in new industries, means that inherently we're blazing a path forward for others who want to access that data later. And so we're actually commoditizing the core value. That's one argument. The next argument is that because we're in a position to have had and accumulated and learned from that data for so much longer, we're able to develop analytics, we're able to develop much more compelling and advanced products as we see new waves of technology. I would just say that that will continue to be the trend, that folks who are starting companies will liberate data in every industry, and it will become up to those who want to put the analytics layer on top of it to shape more of the future.
Yeah, the lens, similar idea here. So in Silicon Valley, everyone talks about these SaaS companies with all these valuable troves of data. But it's easy to talk about data being valuable, and it's very hard to actually make it valuable. And I think that one of the trends that we'll see in the next 10 years is companies that have recognized, I think what we're recognizing as well, you can take that data, put it in through risk capital, and start creating financial products that are able to strip away the risk uniquely, because you're in a position to understand that risk in a way that no one else can. And that's a trend that I think a lot of other SaaS companies are going to migrate and become, call it MGAs themselves.
Oh, in healthcare and health insurance, there's so much change. But I think ultimately what we're going to see is that there's going to be more personal accountability for our healthcare and navigating the care system. And in order to enable that, tools and facilities will need to be built that enable transparency in cost, in quality. And underlaying that is a data layer. That's where we see ourselves in the ecosystem, ultimately becoming the saber of health insurance.
So we've had a chance to talk about some of the exciting potential, some of the challenges, and a little bit of a look forward. I'd love to open it up and hear, we've got a very experienced group from across the ecosystem. If you have 1 or 2 or 3 questions that you'd like to ask these panelists. Not everyone at once. Yeah.
So from a healthcare perspective, Mike, I understand the shifts in pricing, but you mentioned something that I'm really interested in, which is attacking on quality as well.
Yep.
So there's not really a good standard in the market today for that, so I'd like you to just elaborate on that.
I actually think we can make this a slightly broader question, because I think it's interesting around standardization of data across the ecosystem. I think it's very pertinent in healthcare, but I actually think it'd be interesting to hear for others. I might take one more question, and we can do both at the same time, if there's anyone else. Okay, why don't we start with the data standards? Mike, why don't you kick us off?
So you're right. There aren't quality standards per se, and we're very interested in quality because our customers are asking us to deliver that through our pipeline, so that quality can be displayed right next to a plan or a doctor or a hospital. So hospital or plans, there is some quality standards there. We're seeing that. On the other end of the spectrum are providers, and there's deep resistance among a wide swath of providers to quality metrics because they have to be risk weighted. So quality is not something that we will develop or opine on ourselves. Quality metrics will not be. But we're certainly interested in, and we believe the ecosystem will benefit from development of standards, and then we would like to deliver that to our customers.
Yeah, I think on the life side, there have been pretty significant advancements in the standardization of data across a couple different categories. The first of which was just the most basic, which is underwriting, and making sure that you can pass data back and forth about somebody's health class and health status and other information about what categories of smoker you have, whether it's a cigar or a full-time smoker. So there's some standardization there, but there's not a lot around, as we talked about, product quality, whether the price you're paying for a particular product is compelling compared to other products. You really have to, as a consumer, decipher through the use of this, frankly, very inefficient distribution source, which is the financial advisor or the agent, right? And so all of these products almost are sold through the agent because of the complexity and the lack of standardization. The insurers in the room would hear the word standardization in that respect and probably think about commoditization because they have unique products. They want to compete on features and different long-term benefits. And so it's tough. When people are competing to be different, it's very tough to try to get standardization.
I'd actually like to ask a follow-up question around this idea of commoditization. So there was a panel earlier today around corporate venture where one of the speakers actually said that he did not invest in data companies because over time it's valuable to the first player, the second player a lot less value, and the 100th zero value because the data gets commoditized. And so as data providers, how do you actually think about that? Because obviously you're moving the ecosystem forward, but how do you actually think about continuing to provide long-term value to a whole set of clients?
Absolutely. So I heard that comment, and I strongly disagree with this idea for obvious reasons. But selling my own book aside, the challenge here was the assumption. The assumption he was making is that data must be sold to someone else who's actually going to take the risk. I think what we're seeing is a shift is that if we have the data, we're going to go find the capital and also go get the risk ourselves. And I think Jackie from Munich Re put it the best. She said, if RMS was started today, would they be RMS or would they become an MGA? Chances are they'll become an MGA. I think that's the assumption that he's missing.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that it's hard to think about because there's just so many variables involved, right? Mm-hmm. We don't know necessarily whether there's going to be another wave of technology that makes data even more commoditized. What we do know is that using the data we have, we should continue as companies that are reliant upon it to monetize it in different and new ways. In particular, to add an analytics layer, which really creates an impenetrable competitive advantage. And over time, it probably does become less valuable, but the difference is that depending on the industry you're in, there may or may not be a lot of folks trying to compete. Yeah. In ours, there's really nobody because even though life insurance is massive, it's also kind of boring, and folks just don't go into the industry. So change at that type of pace in terms of actually commoditizing our product isn't a concern to us at all. Because we just don't see anyone else even starting to think about it. So
maybe it's just to wrap things up in the conclusion, because I think we've talked about a bunch of different pieces of this ecosystem. I've given you guys a forewarning. Maybe to conclude remarks, why don't you guys each share a tweet, 140 character summary of what you think is the most interesting lesson or prediction of the future. Whoever wants to go first. I'm seeing Cameron nod.
A tweet to be sent out from
Yes.
this event?
Yeah.
I would say make life insurance cool again.
All right, I would say like from SaaS, like from software as a service to MGA.
And I would say that transparency is driving innovation in healthcare.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank our panelists for the wonderful discussion today. And we'll be sticking around in case you want to ask us some more questions.
Thank you.